The sheriff's truck screeched to a halt just steps from my cabin's weathered porch, its red and blue lights painting the tranquil lake in a chaotic glow, shattering the golden evening's calm. Startled birds erupted from the dock, scattering into the sky, while my dog, Buck, let out a low, rumbling growl, planting himself firmly beside my creaky rocking chair. 3 officers stepped out, hands twitching near their belts, one gripping a megaphone like a weapon. "Sir, step away from the property," his voice boomed. "We've got to report you're trespassing on land listed for sale." I blinked, nearly choking on my own disbelief. Say what now? Then I saw her Karen Walker, HOA queen, strutting up in her pristine khakis and windbreaker, pointing at my cabin like she was unveiling a grand jury indictment. "I told them you're a squatter," she crowed, her smirk so smug it could have won an award. "This cabin's been listed for sale under our HOA's emergency foreclosure clause. You're no owner." I raised an eyebrow, calmly pulling the folded deed from my back pocket. "Actually, Karen, I am the owner. And I've got proof." The officers hesitated, one stepping forward to inspect the paper, but Karen snatched it from my hand, ripped it into, and flung it toward the lake like some dramatic movie villain. That's when something in me snapped, not into a fiery rage, but a cold, calculated fury. I didn't yell or curse. I locked eyes with her and said, slow and clear, "I'm buying your house next week." Her smirk froze, her jaw practically hitting the dirt. "My what?" she sputtered. I didn't repeat myself, just pulled out my phone and dialed my realtor right there, with the cops as my audience. And that, folks, is where this wild ride kicked off. But to get why this moment was so electric, you've got to hear what led up to it. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'd love to narrate your story on our channel that got taken advantage of, the signs I ignored, and the woman who thought she could sell what never belonged to her. Let me take you back, but before I do, tell me, where are you watching from? Are you someone who's ever had to deal with a nightmare neighbor? Or maybe you've been underestimated just one time too many. This story is for every kind soul who got trampled by power-hungry people wearing fake smiles. My name is Thomas Avery. I'm 56 years old. I'm a retired carpenter and Vietnam vet. I bought my ranch 12 years ago after working nonstop for almost 3 decades in the city. I built every fence, every deck, and yes, every inch of my lake cabin by hand. I don't have a wife or kids, just me, my dog Buck, and the silence I fought so hard to earn. Then came the HOA. Now, I didn't move into a gated community. Let's make that clear. I bought a massive ranch on the edge of Redwood Lake. It had nothing to do with their manicured streets or their little tennis courts. My land was private, completely fenced with my own entrance and lake access. But 3 years ago, a development project turned the area near the south end of my ranch into an HOA neighborhood called Silver Pines. Fancy signs, perfect lawns, rules about trash bins, all that nonsense. Still, I kept to myself. I wasn't part of their HOA. My property lines were clearly marked. I even installed a steel gate to keep folks from wandering too close. I was the quiet guy on the hill. Nobody bothered me until she showed up. Karen Walker was the new HOA president, moved in 2 years ago from Florida. Thought running Silver Pines was the same as running the country. She introduced herself with a flyer in my mailbox. "Let's work together to beautify our shared spaces." I remember shaking my head. Shared spaces. My ranch was mine. I ignored it. The next week, I found tire tracks on my trail road. Someone had driven an ATV along my fence and left trash near my lake. I installed cameras. Turns out the shared space Karen was talking about was my lake. I caught her cousin fishing off my dock like it was a public pier. Her nephew held a bonfire with beer cans left behind. When I walked down one evening to ask them to leave, they laughed and said, "Karen said it's community property now. I nearly lost it. I marched up to Karen's door the next morning, deed in hand, map printed and boots muddy. I showed her exactly where my land started and ended. She smiled politely and said, "There's been a misunderstanding. I'll speak to my family," but the trespassing didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. A few months later, I got a letter in my mailbox, not from the county, but from Silver Pines' HOA. It stated that due to noncompliance with lakefront safety and upkeep rules, my cabin was under review for public reassignment. I nearly choked. I stormed into their next community meeting, and, let me tell you, the look on those people's faces when I walked in like I was a ghost who wandered in from the woods. "I'm not in your HOA," I said, waving their letter. "You have no power over my land." Karen stood up calmly. "Well, technically the property lines around the lake are fluid. You don't own the water, Mr. Avery." I pointed to the deed. "But I own the land under it," they argued. I yelled. I walked out with the promise to take legal action if they ever stepped foot on my dock again. For a few months, it stopped. Then last week, I came back from a trip to visit my sister in Oregon. And what did I find? A for sale sign in front of my cabin. Not just any sign. An HOA-approved sign with Karen's cousin's number listed as the agent. I thought it was a joke. I yanked it out of the ground and stormed back up to my main house. I was halfway into calling my lawyer when I heard the ATV again. This time it wasn't teenagers. It was Karen. She rode up in boots, gloves, and a clipboard. Said she had paperwork showing the land had reverted to HOA possession due to community abandonment. I laughed in her face. "You've got 10 seconds to leave," I said. She left all right, but not before snapping a photo of my cabin. That evening, the cops showed up, and now you know how it began. But what you don't know is that Karen made one very big mistake. Because when you push a man who's built his life from the ground up, he'll tear your kingdom down brick by brick. And by the end of the week, Karen would find herself locked out of her own home, blocked from her precious HOA meetings, unable to access the roads she claimed to control. How? Let's just say I had a plan, but it all started with a quiet ride into town and one unexpected encounter that would turn everything on its head. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Buck was already pacing near the front door, sensing something was off. He always did. That dog's smarter than most of the folks who sit on Karen's HOA board. I didn't make coffee. I didn't even brush my teeth. I grabbed my hat, my boots, and that torn deed Karen ripped up the day before. I had a laminated copy locked away. Always keep a backup. I drove straight into town, a place called Redstone Bluff. It's the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, and their dog. The kind of place where you nod at old men on porches and the barber's been the same guy for more than 40 years. But I wasn't there for a trim, I was there for war. First stop, my lawyer, Calvin Woodard. He's been my legal guy since I bought the ranch. Wears suspenders every day and has a mustache that makes him look like a sheriff from the 1800s. When I walked into his office, I didn't even sit down. I slapped the HOA letter and the torn-up deed on his desk. "They're trying to sell my lake cabin." Calvin squinted, leaned in, and rubbed his temples again. "Yes, they called the cops last night." He let out a slow whistle. "They're either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid." Across my arms. Both. He flipped through his files, found my original ranch survey, the county-recognized plat map, and all the registration from when I bought the property. Every single foot of my lake, dock, cabin, private and properly documented. "I can get a cease and desist on her by noon," he said. "But if you really want to make this stop permanently, I'd suggest something a little more aggressive." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Calvin grinned. "You ever think of buying into the neighborhood? Not just next to it, inside it." I blinked. "Why the hell would I want to join that HOA circus?" "You don't have to join," he said. "You just have to own." Then it hit me. What if I bought Karen's house? What if I bought the one thing she valued more than her title, her clipboard, and her ridiculous bylaws combined? Her view. You see, Karen's house sat on the corner lot at the very edge of Silver Pines, a big gray two-story with a circular driveway and a white fence she made everyone repaint to match hers. But the best part wasn't the house. It was the only street leading into the Silver Pines neighborhood ran directly beside it. Her private side lot had the only easement in and out. If I bought that lot and then blocked the easement, half the HOA would lose access. And if I bought the house, too, game over. Calvin leaned back in his chair, folding his fingers. We'll have to move fast and quiet. I'll pay cash, I said. Make it happen. But that was only half the battle. We needed a seller. And that's when fate stepped in, because later that same afternoon, as I walked into a little cafe across from the post office, I saw a young woman sitting in the corner crying. She was scrolling on her phone, tears running down her cheeks. I don't usually butt into strangers' lives, but something about her reminded me of my niece. So, I stepped over. You all right, miss? She looked up startled, then sniffed. No, not really. I sat at the edge of her table. Want to talk about it? She chuckled. You some kind of therapist? No, just a guy who's dealt with bad people. She wiped her nose and said, My name's Julie. Karen Walker is my aunt. I've been living with her since my divorce, but last week she kicked me out, said I was dead weight. She threw my clothes in the driveway. I blinked. Of course she did. Julie continued. I don't have the money to leave town yet. I was trying to clean her house and do errands just to stay a little longer. But when I asked her today if I could stay till the weekend, she said she's putting the house up for sale and that I'd better get out before she calls the police. I tilted my head. She's selling the house. Julie nodded. She said she needs a quick cash deal. She's trying to move into some HOA retirement resort in Arizona. She already started talking to a private buyer yesterday. I leaned in. Has she signed anything yet? Not yet. She's waiting for this other buyer to give her a down payment. I smiled. Tell her I'll double it. Julie looked confused. Why would you do that? I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of the for sale sign she posted at my cabin. Julie blinked. Wait, that's your cabin? Yep, and your aunt's been stomping all over my land. Her mouth dropped. Then slowly she grinned. Well, Mr. Avery, you're about to become her worst nightmare. That night, Calvin put together an offer letter in my name along with a separate one under a shell company he handled. The offer was all cash, no inspections, fast close, premium price. Karen couldn't resist. The next morning, she signed it. Julie watched it happen from the hallway and texted me one word. Done. The deed would transfer within days. All I had to do was wait. In the meantime, I went back to my ranch and pretended nothing happened. Karen, on the other hand, doubled down. Her face turned redder than a freight truck. Her lawyer continued, We're here to demand the removal of the gate you're constructing on the eastern road. I walked right past him and tapped on the gate's keypad. The tall iron gate swung open smoothly with a mechanical click. Then I handed him a copy of the recorded property deed and zoning permits. I'm allowed to build a structure on private land I legally own. This road isn't public. It was part of her side lot. I bought the house. I bought the lot. The access is mine. He scanned the papers. And I could already see the feet forming on his lips. Karen stepped forward, hissing under her breath, You're doing this just to punish me. I looked her in the eye. You tried to erase me from my own land. You sent cops to my doorstep. You trespassed, lied, ripped my deed, planted a for sale sign like you were queen of the lake. And now you want to cry foul because someone finally outplayed you. She opened her mouth to shout, but I didn't give her the chance. You've had your say, now get off my ranch. Her lawyer nudged her gently. We should go. As they drove off, Buck let out a single bark. The gate closed slowly behind them. The camera light blinked red, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace on that porch. But that peace didn't last because the very next morning, I found a crowd of angry neighbors gathered near the new gate. Lawn chairs, protest signs, even a banner that read, "Free our road." One man walked up to me, gray beard, golf shirt, HOA pin on his collar. "You've cut us off," he said. "We can't get out the usual way." I pointed to the official detour sign my contractor had put up 2 days earlier. "There's a back road exit, the same one your HOA wanted me to build when you thought I was the problem." He frowned. "It adds 8 minutes to the drive." I stared him down. "That's not my problem." They tried to chant, tried to block workers with folding chairs. One woman yelled that her Amazon packages would be delayed. Another asked how her dog walker would find the new route. Karen's poison had spread, but what nobody expected was the letter that arrived that afternoon from the county planning office. You see, I hadn't just bought Karen's house. I filed for a zoning change that very week. The side road that once served as an easement, I'd requested it be removed from all public use due to private ownership transfer. The approval came through faster than I imagined. I had the final signed notice in my hand, and I knew exactly when to deliver it. So that night, I returned to the Silver Pines board meeting. I stood at the back of the community clubhouse, hat in hand, jeans dusty, flannel rolled at the sleeves. Every pair of HOA eyes turned to me like I was the devil himself. Karen was back at the podium despite no longer living there. I guess no one had told her that selling your house strips you of your seat. She cleared her throat. "As I was saying, we're petitioning to sue Mr. Avery for obstruction of community access." I raised a hand. "Permission to speak." She smirked. "We don't recognize you," but the crowd muttered. They were curious, divided, unsure, so I walked forward calmly and laid the county's letter on the table. Effective immediately, I read aloud, "The eastern easement previously accessed through parcel 118B is now officially revoked from public or community designation. Property use and access control has been lawfully granted to the new landowner." Gasps. A few claps. Karen snatched the paper, eyes darting over the seal. Her face crumbled. "You forged this." "Nope," I said. "Called the county. They'll confirm it tomorrow." She dropped the paper and stormed out. That was the moment her grip on Silver Pines began to break. But I wasn't done. Her face turned redder. "Then a fire truck," her lawyer continued. "We're here to demand the removal of the gate you're constructing on the eastern road." I walked right past him and tapped on the gate's keypad. The tall iron gate swung open smoothly with a mechanical click. Then I handed him a copy of the recorded property deed and zoning permits. "I'm allowed to build a structure on private land I legally own. This road isn't public. It was part of her side lot. I bought the house. I bought the lot. The access is mine." He scanned the papers and I could already see defeat forming on his lips. Karen stepped forward, hissing under her breath. "You're doing this just to punish me." I looked her in the eye. "You tried to erase me from my own land. You sent cops to my doorstep. You trespassed, lied, ripped my deed, planted a foul sign like you were queen of the lake. And now you want to cry foul because someone finally outplayed you." She opened her mouth to shout, but I didn't give her the chance. "You've had your say, now get off my ranch." Her lawyer nudged her gently. "We should go." As they drove off, Buck let out a single bark. The gate closed slowly behind them. The camera light blinked red, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace on that porch. But that peace didn't last, because the very next morning I found a crowd of angry neighbors gathered near the new gate. Lawn chairs, protest signs, even a banner that read "Free our road." One man walked up to me, gray beard, golf shirt, HOA pin on his collar. "You've cut us off," he said. "We can't get out the usual way." I pointed to the official detour sign my contractor had put up 2 days earlier. "There's a back road exit, the same one your HOA wanted me to build when you thought I was the problem." He frowned. "It adds 8 minutes to the drive." I stared him down. "That's not my problem." They tried to chant, tried to block workers with folding chairs. One woman yelled that her Amazon packages would be delayed. Another asked how her dog Walker would find the new route. Karen's poison had spread, but what nobody expected was the letter that arrived that afternoon from the county planning office. You see, I hadn't just bought Karen's house. I'd filed for a zoning change. That very week, the side road that once served as an easement, I'd requested it be removed from all public use to private ownership transfer. The approval came through, faster than I imagined. I had the final signed notice in my hand and I knew exactly when to deliver it, so that night I returned to the Silver Pines board meeting. I stood at the back of the community clubhouse, hat in hand, jeans dusty, flannel rolled at the sleeves. Every pair of HOA eyes turned to me like I was the devil himself. Karen was back at the podium despite no longer living there. I guess no one had told her that selling your house strips you of your seat. She cleared her throat. As I was saying, we're petitioning to sue Mr. Avery for obstruction of community access. I raised a hand. Permission to speak. She smirked. We don't recognize you, but the crowd muttered. They were curious, divided, unsure, so I walked forward, calmly, and laid the county's letter on the table. Effective immediately, I read aloud. The eastern easement previously accessed through parcel 118B is now officially revoked from public or community designation. Property use and access control has been lawfully granted to the new landowner. Gasps, a few claps. Karen snatched the paper, eyes darting over the seal. Her face crumbled. You forged this. Nope, I said. The county. They'll confirm it tomorrow. She dropped the paper and stormed out. That was the moment her grip on Silver Pines began to break. But I wasn't done, because 2 days later, I received an anonymous letter in my ranch mailbox. It had no return address, just a message written in blue ink. We know what you did and you'll regret it. At first, I thought it was just HOA drama. Some angry neighbor still mad about losing lake access. But the next morning, I woke up to find my barn door wide open, and inside my generator smashed to pieces. The wind was sharp that morning, but not as sharp as the chill crawling down my spine as I stared at the wreckage in my barn. My generator, the one I used to power my lake cabin during outages and emergencies, was shattered like someone took a sledgehammer to it. The fuel line had been ripped clean. Wires dangled like spaghetti and parts were strewn across the dirt floor. Buck sniffed the ground, growling low and circling the barn entrance. This wasn't an accident. This was personal. I took a long breath, trying to steady the fire bubbling in my chest. I checked the locks. Nothing was broken. That meant one thing. Someone had a key or someone knew the land well enough to bypass the locks and get in through the back. I called Sheriff Gaines, a no-nonsense man I'd known since I first moved to Redstone Bluff. He arrived an hour later, tall and quiet with boots that made more noise than he did. He walked the scene with me, eyes scanning the damage, taking photos, jotting notes. You think it's Karen? I asked bluntly. He sighed. I can't say yet, but whoever did this wanted to send a message. I got one yesterday, I said, pulling the folded blue ink letter from my jacket pocket. No return address. He read it, jaw tightening. I'll file a report, he said, tucking the note into a plastic bag, but without a camera feed or fingerprints. There's not much we can do. You sure you don't have any enemies besides her? I gave a humorless chuckle, only the one she made for me. After the sheriff left, I installed 2 new cameras. Hidden ones this time, one in the barn, one near the road entrance behind the house. I also added a motion sensor light and a backup lock system. This wasn't going to happen again, but I didn't stop there. See, Karen thought this was a war over property lines and HOA pride. What she didn't understand was that for me, this was personal legacy. Every nail in my cabin, every plank on my dock, I built them with my own 2 hands. My land wasn't a playground. It was peace. It was healing. And I'd be damned if I let her or anyone else erase that. That same afternoon, Calvin called me. You might want to come into town, he said. We've Got a situation. I didn't ask questions. By the time I got to his office, he already had the papers laid out. Karen had filed a temporary injunction against me through a third-party firm, claiming emotional distress, property manipulation, and malicious intent to obstruct public right-of-way. She's trying to bury you in paperwork, Calvin said. Not when. Can she delay the road closure? I asked. No, but she can drag you through court enough times to make your wallet hurt. I sat down slowly. So, we fight back, I said. We could counter-sue for defamation and property damages, Calvin offered. If we add the generator incident, we might even win. I looked at the torn photo of my barn he'd printed from the sheriff's report. Do it. The very next day, Calvin filed the counterclaim, and that evening, I received another visitor. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was a man I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, long coat, slicked hair. He pulled into my ranch in a black sedan and waved politely from his window. I didn't wave back. Can I help you? I asked, stepping onto the porch with Buck beside me. He smiled. Mr. Avery, I represent a group of concerned citizens in Silver Pines. They're hoping to resolve this situation peacefully. I squinted. By resolve, you mean undo what's already been done? He smirked. Let's just say the community would be very grateful if you considered selling back the access road. You've made your point, but surely there's a price that can make this go away. There it was, the bribe. How much are they offering? I asked flatly. He pulled out a checkbook. Name it. I chuckled. Then I walked off the porch, grabbed a shovel from the side of the barn, and walked past him. He followed, confused, until I stopped at a fresh patch of dirt where a new post hole had been dug. This, I said, stabbing the shovel into the soil, is where I'm building a privacy wall, 8 feet tall, stone base, no gaps, no access, no exceptions. He blinked. You're doubling down. I looked him dead in the eyes. This isn't about money. This is about respect. Your HOA came onto my land, mocked me, lied, and tried to sell my cabin like it was some abandoned garden shed. He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. You can tell your people the answer's no. And next time you send someone, make sure it's not a middleman in a rental car with a fake smile. He left without another word. I spent the rest of the night marking foundation points for the wall. Brick delivery was already scheduled. The project would take weeks, but I didn't care. I was in it now. 2 mornings later, I found a new surprise waiting. Someone had poured concrete into the keyhole of my lake cabin door. I had to break the entire knob off to get inside. Inside, the kitchen window had been cracked. On the fridge, scrolled in black marker, were the words, "Get out, old man." That was the last straw. I called Sheriff Gaines again and filed an official escalation report. He shook his head as he documented everything. This is crossing into harassment, he said. And if it's who we both think it is, she's unraveling. You think she'll stop? No, he said grimly. I think she's planning something bigger. I couldn't sleep that night. Buck slept by the door, ears twitching at every noise, and just before dawn, I got a call. It was Julie, Karen's niece. She sounded shaken. She's at it again, she whispered. She's been talking to some guys, real shady ones. I overheard her say she's going to make the old man disappear and clean up the mistake once and for all. My heart slammed against my chest. She said that. Yes. I didn't know who else to tell. Please be careful. She's losing it, Mr. Avery. I thanked her, hung up, and walked outside. The fog was thick across the lake, and for the first time in a long time, I felt fear settle in my bones. Not for the land, not for the cabin, but for me. Karen was coming, and I didn't know what she'd do next. I didn't go back to sleep after Julie's call. Instead, I sat in the cabin's rocking chair with a thermos of coffee in one hand and my old hunting rifle propped next to the door. Buck laid at my feet, eyes open, ears up, He knew something wasn't right. By noon, I had already reviewed all the security footage from the night before. Nothing out of the ordinary, just raccoons, wine brushing branches, and one passing delivery truck, but that didn't mean I was safe. Karen had crossed many lines already. She'd trespassed, vandalized, threatened, and now she was talking about making me disappear. I wasn't about to wait around and see how far she'd take it. I loaded up the truck and headed into town. First stop, Sheriff Gaines. I showed him the footage, the vandalized keyhole, and repeated what Julie had told me. He didn't blink. All right, he said. Standing slowly, it's time we pay Karen a visit. I followed him in my truck as he drove up toward the Silver Pines community. When we reached Karen's new rental home, just a few miles away on the other side of town, he knocked, firmly, hand near his belt. She answered in a silky robe and sunglasses like she was on some vacation. Sheriff Gaines didn't waste time. We've had multiple complaints of harassment and vandalism connected to you, Karen. This includes destruction of property, trespassing, and verbal threats. Karen didn't flinch. I don't know what you're talking about. He pulled out a printed copy of the marker-written threat. Get out, old man. Her lips tightened. That could be anyone. Julie told us what you said. I cut in from behind, about cleaning up the mistake. About making me disappear. Her face twisted. Julie's a spoiled brat who shouldn't be sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. Gaines stepped forward. If I find your fingerprints on that cabin, if I get another report from Mr. Avery or any evidence that you're involved in any further harassment, what? She spat. You'll arrest me. He didn't answer, but he didn't have to. That night, I reinforced every window on the cabin with metal latches and slid heavy bolts across the doors. I checked the cameras again, but never left my side. The next few days passed in tense silence. The HOA protests faded. The neighbors, though still bitter about the blocked road, began adjusting to the new route. Some even waved awkwardly when they drove past the edge of my ranch. But the real storm hadn't hit yet, because on Thursday morning, I received a letter, certified mail. It was from the county zoning office. According to the letter, my newly built gate and privacy wall had violated public emergency vehicle access protocol and interfered with community safety routes. I blinked at the page, reading it 3 times. Then I saw the fine, $25,000, and a notice that the county might issue an order to demolish the gate if the issue wasn't resolved. I drove straight to the zoning office, fists clenched and letter in hand. The woman behind the counter looked confused as I explained everything. She clicked through her system. This isn't adding up, she said. You received full clearance 3 weeks ago, and no complaints were officially filed after that. She frowned, then leaned closer and whispered, Let me show you something. She turned her screen to me. This complaint, it was hand-filed, meaning someone came in person to report you. And there it was. A scanned image of the written complaint. Signed Karen Walker. I almost laughed. She was still trying, still clawing, still convinced. She could undo everything with one piece of paper. I told the zoning office the full story. Kelvin facts over our prior approval and legal documentation. It would take a few days, but the fine was temporarily frozen while they investigated. Still, I left that office with a sour taste in my mouth. Karen had gone from trespasser to vandal to paper terrorist. That night, I decided to pay her one final visit, not to threaten, not to argue, but to tell her face to face that she was finished. When I pulled up outside her rental house, I noticed the porch light was off, curtains drawn, no car in the driveway, but someone was inside. I knocked once, no answer, then twice. A voice behind the door snapped, Go away. It's Thomas Avery, I said calmly. I'm not here to fight. Silence. Then the door opened an inch. Karen stood behind it, half her face shadowed. What do you want? I looked her square in the eye. You need to stop. She let out a bitter laugh. Why? Because I lost my house, my neighborhood, My status. Because you're destroying yourself, I said. And I won't be the one who helps you do it. She opened the door wider. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken. You ruined me, she whispered. Everything I built gone. No, I said gently. You ruined yourself. All I ever did was defend what was mine. She stared at me. And for the first time, I saw something crack behind that steel mask. Sadness. Regret. Maybe. Even fear. I don't have anywhere to go, she mumbled. I nodded slowly. That's not my fault. I turned to leave, but before I reached my truck, she called out, You know they're still coming, right? I stopped. What? The others. Not from the HOA from before that. People who made deals with me for access to your lake. Promises. Money. You think I did all this on my own? I slowly turned around. She smiled. Broken, but knowing. You didn't just make enemies in the HOA, Mr. Avery. You bought yourself a war. My stomach dropped. Was this bigger than Karen? Was there more to this than I realized? I didn't speak. I just got in my truck and drove. That night, I locked every door twice, and before bed, Buck barked 3 times toward the woods behind the cabin. The camera caught something, a figure in the trees, watching, still, waiting. The figure in the trees didn't move for 5 whole minutes. I watched from the security monitor inside the cabin as the shape stood frozen just beyond the tree line. Too far for the cameras to catch a face, but close enough for me to know it wasn't wildlife. Buck growled low, his fur stiff, when the motion sensor light flicked on. The figure turned and disappeared into the woods. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I'd already installed 2 more cameras, one facing the lake trail, the other facing the service road that wound around the back of the ranch. Then I drove straight into town and met with Calvin. I think Karen was telling the truth, I said, tossing a flash drive onto his desk. Someone was on my land last night watching. He plugged in the flash drive and watched the footage, his face hardened. Not your average trespasser, he muttered. I want to know what deal she made, I said. And with who? Calvin stood and grabbed his jacket. Then we're going to the county recorder's office. 2 hours later, we had what we needed. Karen had filed 3 access agreements over the past year before I bought her house. All were written under vague legal terms like seasonal use and shared recreational development. But the signatures, one of them was from Evergreen Property Group, a land development company based 2 counties over. Calvin's face turned white when he saw the name. You ever hear of Lakewood Estates? Yeah, I said. Fancy development they tried to build a few years back. Got shut down by protests. Same people, he said. Evergreen. Turns out Karen had made a backdoor deal. She'd promised developers access through her property so they could scope out my side of the lake, hoping to eventually buy me out or pressure the county into claiming eminent domain. And when I bought the land, I killed their plan. They stood to lose millions, Calvin said. I stared at the paper. Then this isn't about the HOA anymore. No, he said grimly. This is about revenge. I spent the next few days locking down every legal angle, tightening my property lines, installing floodlights, and filing formal notices of trespassing through the sheriff's office. Calvin even drafted an injunction warning Evergreen's name directly, but the tension on my ranch didn't ease. It got worse. On Thursday morning, I woke up to find the lock on my tool shed sliced clean through. My generator parts were gone again, and this time my water tank had been slashed, spilling hundreds of gallons into the dirt. I called Sheriff Gaines immediately. Someone's escalating, he said, crouched near the damaged tank. And it ain't Karen this time. That evening, I called Julie. She answered after the second ring. I've been meaning to reach you, she whispered. I think you're in danger. Tell me everything, she sighed. 2 guys came to visit my aunt. They weren't from the HOA. They drove a black truck with tinted windows. She didn't want me to hear, but I caught a few words. Retaliation, pressure, and something about scaring the old man off his land. I clenched the phone tighter. She's helping them. Julie hesitated. I think she's in too deep to back out. That night, I didn't just lock the cabin. I set up a cot in the barn with Buck by my side. I wasn't going to let my land be picked apart piece by piece. And sure enough, just after 2 a.m., I heard it. A soft engine, tires crunching gravel. Buck growled, then barked. I jumped up, grabbed my flashlight, and peeked out the barn window. A dark pickup truck was creeping along the ranch road, lights off, crawling like a snake through the mist. They didn't know I was awake. I turned on every floodlight at once. The truck jolted, paused, then spun around and took off into the trees. I ran outside, flashlight beaming, but they were gone. Sheriff Gaines came again the next morning. He reviewed the footage, but the plates had been covered. We'll run prints on the gate. Maybe the log pieces, he said, but whoever this is, they're trained. They know how to avoid leaving evidence. I looked out across the lake. I've lived here in peace for over a decade, built everything myself, kept to myself, respected boundaries, and now I was being hunted for the same land I once bought for healing. But I wasn't backing down, because later that day, I got a surprise call from a man named Charles Addington. He said he was with the State Environmental Agency. We've had multiple complaints filed against your property, he said. Claims that you're polluting the lake and endangering community safety. My jaw tightened. Filed by who? He hesitated. Evergreen Property Group and Silver Pines' HOA. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Mr. Addington, I said, I hope you know I have footage, legal deeds, zoning permits, and a lawyer who doesn't blink. He chuckled nervously. I figured I just wanted to give you a heads up. These folks are aggressive, and they're trying to use government pressure to force your hand. That night, I stood at the lake dock and watched the moon ripple in the water, and I made a choice. I wasn't going to wait for the next attack. I was going to expose them, all of them, Karen, Evergreen, the dirty tricks, the shady deals. I was going to gather every document, every video, every recorded call, and I was going to take it to the press. And just as I turned to head back to the cabin, my phone buzzed. A video message from Julie. I tapped it. Karen, standing outside a hotel, screaming into her phone. I don't care what it costs. Burn it down if you have to. I want him gone. I replayed it twice, my heart pounding. Then I hit save because now I had proof. But I didn't know just yet that while I was planning to go public, they were already making their final move. And by sunrise, something would be in flames. The air felt thick at sunrise. It wasn't just the summer heat. It was that strange pressure you feel before something breaks, like the sky holding its breath. I stood on the porch of my lake cabin, cup of coffee untouched, watching the mist crawl across the water like it was hiding something. Buck paced nervously at the top of the stairs. He kept looking toward the east trail. Something was wrong. Then my phone rang. It was Sheriff Gaines. Tom, he said, his voice urgent. You need to get to your main house now. I didn't ask why. I just ran. When I reached the top ridge where my main house sat, I saw the smoke first, dark and curling above the trees like a warning. My barn was on fire. Flames licked through the roof, crackling like laughter. Tools I'd collected over 40 years, gone. My lumber pile gone. Even the old canoe I'd built with my father as a boy, now melting into ash. I froze for half a second, then ran to the hose line, spraying anything I could. Buck barked wildly, darting around the perimeter. Within minutes, two fire trucks from Redstone Bluff pulled in, sirens cutting through the morning. Sheriff Gaines arrived behind them. No one spoke at first, not while we watched the heart of my ranch burn. By noon, the fire was out. The barn was a skeleton of black wood and twisted steel. Gaines came to me, face grim. This wasn't an accident, he said. Accelerant was used. Entry signs on the south fence. Whoever did this came prepared. My jaw clenched. Karen, he shook his head. No, this was bigger than her. I pulled out my phone and showed him the video Julie had sent. The one with Karen shouting, "Burn it down if you have to." He took it silently, watched it 3 times, then nodded. "This is enough to get her charged," he said. "But if Evergreen's behind this, it's going to take more." That was all I needed to hear. I drove into town straight to the Redstone Gazette, the local paper. I met with their lead reporter, Dana Price, who had once covered a crook zoning commissioner 3 years ago. She didn't flinch when I showed her everything: the deed to my property, the fake sale listing Karen filed, the vandalism reports, the fire, the HOA's shady complaint letters, the video of Karen screaming about burning the place down. Then I dropped the biggest piece: the access agreements Karen had signed with Evergreen, documents Calvin had verified and printed out with timestamps. Dana's eyes widened. "Do you realize," she said slowly, "that if this goes public, you're going to blow the lid off a major land corruption scandal?" "I realize I've got nothing left to lose." She nodded. "We're printing this tomorrow. Front page." I drove back to the ranch in silence, watching the clouds gather like they were listening. By the next morning, the headline hit the newsstands: HOA president and developer exposed in ranch arson scheme. Local veteran speaks out. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages: neighbors, old friends, reporters, even strangers from other states. The video of Karen's outburst went viral. People shared it with captions like, "Karen goes too far, and this is why we hate HOAs." But the best part: a day later, the county responded. The planning board froze all development permits filed by Evergreen. They opened a formal investigation into their relationship, with Silver Pines HOA and Karen arrested. Julie filmed it from her car and sent it to me with a single word: justice. She was charged with multiple counts: trespassing, vandalism, and inciting arson. But Evergreen, they weren't done yet. They filed a counterclaim accusing me of slander and obstruction of economic development. Calvin met me with a smile. "They're scared," he said. "This is their last desperate swing." We took them to court, and for 3 months, I sat in a cold courtroom, listening to suits and shiny shoes talk about potential revenue and community impact. But when the judge saw the video of Karen screaming about burning me out, the gavel came down hard. Case dismissed, Evergreen fined. And that wasn't all, because thanks to public support, donations poured in. People wanted to help me rebuild my barn. Veterans group sent money. A carpenters union volunteered to build. Even the Silver Pines residents, those same ones who once protested the road closure, showed up with shovels, wood, and paint. One man, Jerry from Lot 12, said with tears in his eyes, "I didn't know what she was doing to you." I'm sorry. For the first time in months, I felt peace again. We rebuilt the barn, and I didn't stop there. I used part of the donation fund to build a community dock on my terms, open every Sunday for veterans and kids to fish and learn woodworking. I called it Buck's Landing, named after the dog who never left my side. And as for Karen, she served 6 months. When she got out, she moved 2 states away. No HOA ever hired her again. Evergreen, they lost their license in the county and pulled out entirely. Now I sit on my porch every evening, watching the sun drop behind the hills. Coffee in hand, no sirens, no screaming, just peace, and every once in a while, a neighbor drives by and honks. Sometimes strangers stop at the gate just to say, "You're the guy who stood up to them, right?" Yeah, that's me. The old man they tried to erase, but I stood my ground. And I built something stronger than walls and fences. I built truth, and nobody's selling that. If you enjoyed this story, tell us, have you ever had to stand up to someone who pushed you too far? What would you have done if you were in my boots? Like, comment, and share this with anyone who's ever faced a Karen.